title itself is Preparing the Redeemer for Israel. Very nice. But basically what convinced Kadosh Baruch Hu to choose Moshe. And as I started to say, there are a number of things you yourself saw at Kansin, even before I've started this, that you saw in the early life of Moshe Rabbeinu and the early stories that had to do with him. What exactly it was that may have formed him or showed God that he was proper to do this. No question about it. We can go through that. But there's more than that. As is often the case, certainly with Abraham and others, there's not many details that are revealed regarding the early years of Moshe Rabbeinu, the first 40 years, the ones that are spent in Mitzrayim, in Egypt itself. But let's face it, if you God forbid, open Malachim Bet, Malachim Aleph, and Perek Yud Zayim, and you see Vayomer Eliyahu HaNavi. What? Never saw anything about Eliyahu throughout the Navi. All of a sudden, Eliyahu said to the people, "There won't be rain until I say so." Well, who are you? What? So the concept I'm not seeing with the early life of a person, of a main character, is not something that is rare. In fact, what we learn about Moshe is probably a little more than we learn about others, but nonetheless, a careful study of these events that the Torah tells us, events about Moshe Rabbeinu, will enlighten us about his basic upbringing and what really impacted him in that early life. When we first learned about Moshe in the Torah, and I did not put all of these things in the Torah because some of the basic part of the story, which I wasn't going to give you, we learn, first of all, about Moshe Rabbeinu only in the second chapter, in Perek Bet, where it stops by telling us that Vayelech ish beit Levi, Vayikach et bat Levi. But at any rate, when we first learned about Moshe as a taik, he was actually an infant when he was just born, and at his birth, we read that as the first source tells us. And I did not, as I said, really translate that because I will explain it momentarily. It says there, "Vatere oto ki tovhu," that when Yocheved, the mother, had seen him at birth, she saw that he was good. So of course everybody, what mother sees something? He's as ugly as anything. Who's going to say that? What mother's going to say that? He's a rotten kid. Of course, every new mother is going to say, well, how wonderful the child is. So what was meant by ki tovhu? Okay, so the Gemara in Sotah gives a few insights, different opinions, different insights of what it meant that this infant Moshe was tov, was good. Okay, so the Sotah is in Hebrew, Aramaic actually, but I think it's almost all Hebrew here, that it means, Tanya, Rabbi Meir Omer Tov Shemo. So the first opinion, that of Rabbi Meir, is simply that Tov Shemo, his name was Tov. That's what she named him. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Tuvia Shemo. Close, but no cigar, says Rabbi Yehuda. Says it's not Tov, but Tovia, or Tuvia. And Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Hagun L'Neviut. She saw that he was fitting to be a prophet. And Acherim Omrim, the other opinions say that Nolad Shehu Mahul. He was outstanding because he didn't need a Brit Milah. He was already circumcised when he was born. Mahul, that's why he was told. And Chachamim Omrim, whereas the majority said, B'sha'ah shenolad Moshe nitmalei habayit kulo or. This is the one that Rashi quotes and that most people remember, that when he was born, all of a sudden light filled this house. It was filled with light. It isn't just a matter of, that's a nice little thing, but they basically upon, when's the first time the word tov is found in the Torah? It's found for the first time, as the Gemara says, but it says, "Vayar Elokim et haor ki tov." The first time the word tov is found in the Torah is when it actually expresses what is or. Or was tov.
No, the creation of the world.
That's when the creation of the world. God said we created the world, and the first thing He creates is the or. And it says, or ki tovu. And so that he saw the or. They said, here it says tov. There's the first time it says tov, it's referring to light. Over here it says, so it filled light. Very nice. Very nice, these all different ideas. The idea that tov could mean that he had the ability of nevuah, right? And that is almost true when you look at the events that go through his life, Moshe's life, which we will begin right now. And actually, as Rav Bazak says, you can take the story of Moshe in his early years and divide it up in the in Parak Bet, in the second chapter, to 3. The first 10 verses, first psukim, refer to Moshe's childhood, and we'll go through that. The second 5, from psukim Yud Aleph to Tet Vav, we see his growth, and in the last 6, 7, we have the adulthood. From psukim Tet Zayim to Chaf Bet. So 3 segments, parts of his growing up. That's how it's given in the Torah. Adulthood. I'm a big boy. That type of thing. But you can tell how. Okay. If you also want to break down the events that happened to Moshe to really form him, I suppose, and impact him, or certainly convince God that he's fitting, we read, first of all, in the chapter, beginning with the criminal acts of Mitzrayim, of the Pharaoh and of Egypt, the decree of the Pharaoh, Kol haben hayilod hayao atashlichuhu. Throw him into throw every male child into the river. That's the Pharaoh. Then the Mitzri who was found, Makeh, who was beating, actually almost killing a slave, a Hebrew slave. So that's the first part of the events. Second part of the events are the acts of opposition against Paro. What were they? Well, the mother of Moshe also went against Paro's decrees, right? She hid the baby so that he not be found and thrown into the river. And then we read of the Mitzri who was killed by Moshe. Moshe who kills the one who's trying to kill the Hebrew, right? And then the third part was now Pharaoh's threats to Moshe's life. And there you read the decree, he says, of course, of the, as I said, the male children, which before his birth, that was certainly a threat to his existence. And of course, when eventually, after Moshe had killed the Egyptian, who was right, Pharaoh then pursues him, tries to kill him. It says that he has his men try after him, right? So that forces Moshe to flee, to run away. So those are the 3 things. Those are the first 3. Still in that parak, we find, we go to Gimel this time, ready? Moshe escaped. He escapes to safety. Where does he go? Midian. He goes to Midian, right? He goes from At first he goes from his home to the palace, right? Then from the palace to Midian, right? He was taken out of his home after he was born and taken from the river, right? And then the naming of his children, the other part, Menashe and Ephraim. All right, so that's basically the stories as they're broken down into the... Huh? I'm sorry, my mistake. I'm sorry. You're right. It's of course Gershom and Eliezer.
Excuse me, Midian
But only Gershom is mentioned.
Midian is not in Egypt.
No, Midian is a separate country.
How did he know where to go?
Ways.
Moshe.
No, look. You have to understand something. Just because you haven't been there, in the ancient world, there were constant camels. Wasn't the Ishmaelim coming down to Egypt? Didn't they know how to go down there? Didn't Yaakov and the sons know how to go down from there to? So they knew. They were concentrating going between us. So he knew that he ran away there to Midian. Well, Midian is only across the desert, the Sinai. Right across, you go from west to east. He goes to Midian and a little north to Midian, from Mitzrayim to Midian. Not that complicated. But we do know note a number of curiosities, I suppose we put it that way, puzzlements, regarding the very first section of the second parak. First of all, you look at Moshe as being, in the very beginning, of course, as being very fully passive. The first 10 psukim, he was just a baby, right? But more than that, when he was born, what was he named? No name. When it comes to the birth of the sons of Yaakov, after each birth it says, Vayikrat Shemo, Vatikrat Shemo, they called him this name, called him that name. Even when Moshe has a child that says, Vayikrat Shemo Gershom, usually birth and then the name. Here he's born, and then we find out that they're throwing him into a river. So there's no name there at all. Very known incident. So one of these opinions in the Gemara that she called him Tov, Tovia. So because after all, we call him the kid. Well, yeah, nowadays you wait for the bris, so it's still the same 7-8 days, But there you go. Well, that's what the problem was. How are we going to name him if we didn't have a bris? But anyway, so in that way, there's a passive things. And as a result, throughout these first 10 psukim, he's called Yeled. He's never called, never called by a name or Ben some way. I'm not going to go through the second thing, because when you look, we don't know the name of the father or the mother either, or the sister. Not found. All right, so secondly, we're told about the hiding of Moshe, of course. When is the decree of throwing them into the river given? It's in the beginning of Shemot, in Perek Aleph, right? And the Torah doesn't say anything about it until right before Moshe is born. It doesn't say, why doesn't it tell the story of Moshe back then and Paro said, give him, and then great. And there was from Ben Levi, who was from Bat Levi, and they had a child. It'll be a perfect segue from one to the other, and it doesn't. It waits till Perek Bet for that. That's interesting. It's not that troubling.
But it makes no sense.
Huh?
It makes no sense. We're lacking something. A man took a wife, and she had a child.
That's the next we're going through,
She
right?
has a child. And all of a sudden, he's got a big sister and a big brother. Where'd they come from?
Huh? Same way. Where did the father and mother come from? It said they came from Levi. Huh?
What was his father's name?
It's either Irving or Amram.
And your cousin.
Correct. And that, by the way, is not given to us until Va'era. Perek Vav of Zion in Shemot. Not given here. That's also, and that's the whole point. The father Amram is not given by name, nor is Yocheved, nor is his sister Miriam, nor is even mentioned of her brother Aaron. Not even mentioned there.
So it would seem that Moshe was the firstborn.
Exactly. Except for the fact that it says, and his sister had to watch over him. We wouldn't have known he had any older sibling.
Aaron was his older brother,
Yes, he was.
so he's just completely left out of it.
You betcha. I used to complain to my parents about the same thing about me. Oh, anyway, so it seems there's no detail about what you think, but who's the family? No father, no mother. Names aren't there at all. By the way, who finally saves him from the river? Good. What's her name? It's not given.
Maybe, but they say Batya, but I don't know where that says that.
It's based upon a Divrei Hayamim. And there's this Batya. Why the Chazal call it Bitya? I don't know. But anyway, she's Bat Paro. She's Achot Achoto. He's an Ish who's a Ben Levi, and she's a Bat Levi. No names. It's no names. Not found. I would say. In other words, the first thing about the story that we're going to know is Moshe. Nothing else is that important. Moshe, the first name that's mentioned in the story. I would say from the beginning, but I'll get to that later, from the beginning of Shemot, Paro wasn't the name. Paro was Schwarzfarb, it's his last name, but they didn't know that. Paro, they called him. Right? It was the Pharaoh, but we don't know his name. Ramses, whatever it is. Okay? Not given. What two names were given? The only other name before Moshe? Shifra and Puah. Yeah? They were given names. Vidialdot. Interesting. All right. Anyway, Rav Bazak points out something I found very interesting. It's clear that the story of Moshe really does compare to another story. For example, you're going to excuse me, I just want to mention one thing here. See, I didn't bother you to look into the texts. I have the sources of what I went through the first part of Shemot, and the different stories there, right? I didn't give you that, but it's here in number 2, Aleph, Bet, and Gimel, of the different sections of the stories of Moshe when he was a child. You see that? And then Bet is when he was now growing up, right? And then the Gimel, the last part, is when he's an adult. Okay, so in case we have to look at the sources there, you'll see the sources right there. At any rate, before we get to number 3, you can see number 3 from what I gave in the chart that I gave you. What is the story of Moshe and his birth very close to? You can see that clearly when I gave here. It's the story of Noah. Why? Why? What was Noah's boat called? Teva. And what was Moshe placed in? A Teva. The basket he was placed in to float down the Nile, or at least to put really on the side of the Nile, was called the Tevat Atzei Gopher. No, that's what that should have. But it's, as you see in the first part of the third source, in Bereshit it says, God tells Noah, Aseh lecha Tevat Atzei Gopher, and the chafarta bakofer. What does it say here in with Moshe's story? Vatikach lo tevat gomer vatachmer bechema uvazefet. You have the coding, the fact that it was a teva. Then you have that it says Vayavo Noach ubanav ishto el hateva. Noach was taken into the teva, and vatasem bat hayeled, and the mother gave the child Moshe into the teva. And then you have when it started to rain and the flood began, Vayirbu hamayim. there was a lot of water, and Vayisu HaTeva, the Teva started to float on top, more over the land, in other words, it's on the water. And it says, okay, Vatasem Basufah Svar HaYaor. So was Moshe's Teva, put it in the water and started floating. So there was an interesting connection there. If it's important or not, probably not, but it's clear. And like I said, there are certain things that I'll give just as sort of curiosities, puzzlements, but I won't necessarily focus on them. But I think it's interesting when you listen to the Parsha, please God, the Shabbos, say, oh, look at this, it's interesting. And the second, believe it or not, story that's so close to the story of Moshe, maybe even more close, is the story of Hagar and Yishmael. Remember, Hagar is Avram's, actually I should say Sarah's Pilegesh, and then became Abraham's Pilegesh. In the same way that you see that Batashlech et Hayeled, by Yishmael Elkim et Kol Hanar, that Yishmael is referred to as a Yeled, and God listened to the cry of the Na'ar, of the child, okay? And in Moshe, Vatirehu et Hayeled, Bat Paro saw the Yeled, and yet Hine Ibnar Bocher, and the cries of the child, it was called a Na'ar. Just like the cries of Ishmael, it was called a Na'ar. First, he was just a Yeled. When he cried out, it was a Na'ar. Over here also, with Moshe, he was simply, she saw only a Yeled, like an infant, and when he started crying, she said, now he's a Na'ar. Interesting that both had the same thing. And what did the mother do, Hagar, to her child? She puts him away. Vatashlech et hayeled tachat achar hasichim. She throws him under the bushes. What does the mother of Moshe do? Vatasem basuf. She places him in the reeds, like a bush, right? Al sfar hayar, on the edge of the river. Very interesting, very, very close. Then you have also, what does the mother do? After she throws the child under the bushes, Hagar says, "Vatelech vateshev la mineged harcheik kim tachavei keshed." She goes and sits down far away, actually a whole arrow's distance away from the child. On the other hand, what does it say with Moshe? Vatetzatzav acharto merachok. Sister now also stands far away from the baby, to find out what's going to happen. Whereas Hagar didn't care what's going to happen. She don't want to see, so she's watching over, which is not what she does. Very interesting how they tie together. Then we read that when Ishmael grows up, he's settled in the wilderness there, and he becomes an archer. And it says the same word, Vayigdal Hayeled, with Moshe. He grew up, and then it says, Vayivrach mepnei Paro vayeshev be'eretz Mitzrayim vayeshev be'er. And eventually he runs away and ends up in Midian, in the wilderness of Midian. Interesting again. These are very interesting things that it's worthwhile just to mention. And then here you have also, do I have more here? No, 4. Okay.
Why do you say she distanced herself?
Oh, wonderful. He left out. Do you have number 5 here?
Yes.
You do. Okay, good. So I don't have the 5. Good. Okay. Good. 4. Good. I have. Yeah, I have the extra here. So I have 5. I guess this one didn't have it. I don't know. I guess I was tired. Or whatever. You know how I say, I was mistaken. I thought I made a mistake. Anyway, there's more. There are 2 more things that connect the story of Ishmael with that of Moshe. You have Vatashlech et Hayeled achad, like we said, Tachal achar hasikim. She throws him under the bush, and And that's similar to what Paro does, where he says, tashlichuhu. Throw, where she threw Ishmael under the bushes, right? Paro said, throw every son into the river. There's also a little connection, right? And whereas Hagar, Tesha came far away and she just started crying. Bat Paro, watiftach vatireh helad v'ninar bocha. It was Bat Paro who saw the child who was crying and took care of her. So there are a lot of common things in the two stories. Is there something to learn about them? Probably, but we're not going into it. Anyway, I just wanted to put these interesting part things. The point is that whereas Ishmael, we're told, he throws, he's tashlich alei, the mother here, vatitzpano, hides the child, right? Whereas Ishmael is saved by a divine miracle, by Yiftacha and Elokim et Eineha, God allowed Hagar to see there was some water that would actually save the life of the child that was dying from thirst. In Moshe, there was no Elokim here. Who saves Moshe? Bat Paro, a human being. Which one would imagine the opposite it should be, right? Doesn't happen that way. So all these very interesting. So anyway, these are all interesting points that have nothing to do with the essential part of the Nashir, but I hope you're enjoying it. Yes?
Can I just ask, because I think the regular understanding of a Na'ar is a youth.
Yes, that's correct.
So suddenly Moshe is moved from being a tiny
It's,
baby to a youth.
yeah, it's true. It's very interesting that generally speaking, I'm generally speaking, that the Na'ar we view as not just an infant. A Na'ar is already grown up, Ki yeled yulad anu, right? And it's often Na'ar afterwards. So, but you do have times, in this case, Yishmael and Moshe, where in the same pasuk, the yeled is then called a Na'ar. Is there significance there? Perhaps, but it's not that rare. That's true.
Did they ever use Tinoch?
Huh?
Did they ever use Tinoch in Chumash?
Tino, yeah, sometimes, yeah. Uh-huh.
But they never, it seems like that would be the best.
I would imagine so. It's correct. It'd be interesting to go through where Tinoch is found.
How old was Moshe when she puts him into the basket? 3 months. 3 months.
She had him for a few
3
months.
months.
3 months, correct.
She had him for 3 months.
Correct.
So
3
she
months.
puts his 3-month-old baby into the basket.
Well, he learned how to swim early in life.
No, he was in the basket.
Huh?
He didn't know how to swim. He was in the basket.
Oh, correct.
Waterproof.
Yeah, obviously, that's correct. And she had the sister, who I'm sure complained about it, by the way, to stay over there and make sure that everything's okay with the child. That's correct. Now,
And how old was his sister that she was taking?
we don't know, although we do know.
Mommy isn't there, it's just sisters there.
The most possible or most acceptable, if I can use that term, guesstimate is that she was sometime between 3 or 5 years older than Moshe. But if she was 3, it's not like the Rivka, she had to be about 5, 6, I would imagine. And she does die the same year Moshe does, but she was older than she was. We do know that Aaron is 3 years older than Moshe. That we do know. So she had to be more than 3 years older.
He's older than Aaron.
Yes, that we know also.
It's interesting, I just can't imagine how who's not Yocheved yet felt putting this baby and seeing what would happen to them. I don't know if I would want to know what was going to happen to them because I would assume it would be bad. There's sort of an implication that Yocheved thought something good might actually happen.
Well, I think that was very wise of her. Maybe she'll be, it could be picked up. Maybe it can be hidden again. Maybe somebody nice would take it, as it did happen. And as it worked out, exactly even more than she imagined, that she ended up, nursing the baby and, bringing her up. Anyway.
Then there's the famous question is, what does Batya see when she opens up the basket and she says, this is obviously a Jewish baby?
Right.
So she saw that he was circumcised?
Exactly, probably, yeah.
I would say
Or-
that she just saw, I would say she said, like, well, who's throwing their babies away in the river?
Right, that's another
Gotta be
thing.
you.
I'm a sugar, only a Jewish mother would do this to a kid. No, I know, but that really is true. Who would be so out of what to do that they put a baby that's floating down a river? Or even why would he put her there? She's hiding a baby. Why would he hide a baby? Because of my father, and so that would make sense. Whether we say whether we say it was the Brit Milah, but simply the logic that the only people who would be hiding babies would be those who were told to throw the baby in the. At any rate, I want to begin therefore with the overview of the upbringing of Moshe. What seems to be clear, and I've sort of pointed to it somewhat already, is that this soon-to-be Redeemer was brought up by strong women, courageous women, women who fought danger. Look at the stories; they're very clear. Quick perusal of what's happening, right? When you go through, as I said at the beginning of Shemot, and this is I mentioned, except for the very beginning list of who were the sons of Yaakov who come to them, there's no names that are mentioned here. No male names at all. There was a Paro who was just a title. There was, as I said, Ish Mibeit Levi, and eventually in Perek Gimel we have Yitro. That's it. But what significant females are mentioned in this time? Shifra and Puah, the midwives, right? There was Bat Levi, who gave birth, Yochebed. There was Achot of the baby, which was Miriam. She's mentioned, not by name, but mentioned, There is Bat Paro. There is eventually Benot Yitro. And who does Moshe marry? What's the name? You have to know the name of Moshe's wife? It wasn't Lily, huh?
No, it was
Come on. Moshe's last name was Tzipporah. We probably called her Tzippy, but Tzipporah was the name. That was, huh? Fegi, that's right. Yeah, unfortunately, they hadn't learned Yiddish yet, but right. How did they have an impact on Moshe? Let's go through this. Very, very simple. His mother, saved his life, right? Nursed him, and undoubtedly, once she brings him into her home till he is weaned, she taught him whatever Israelite culture or common things that they had been following since the time of Yaakov. She taught him that.
It doesn't make sense. Batya, the daughter of Paro, finds his baby, and then this strange girl comes to her and says, I know somebody who could nurse him.
Mm-hmm.
And the princess doesn't say, I got my own nursemaids back in the palace.
Right.
Why would she allow a Hebrew woman to nursemaid this child that she just picked up?
Exactly right. In other words, that's exactly why. If what Egyptian is going to want to nurse a Hebrew child that has to be killed? And they didn't want to risk that. Chazal go and say that yes, it's true that she had asked that she had asked others and they couldn't do it. The text does not say that. The text very logically says, she says, I'm a Hebrew, and she says, I have a Hebrew mother who will nurse her. And he said, good, great idea, take her there. Because she as Princess A would not, and she could not, she wasn't pregnant or anything. Two, she couldn't go back to, hi Dad, you want to see my baby? I just got it. It's a Hebrew guy, She couldn't do that. She had to be a little bit hidden and not that obvious. And therefore, she found someone who would be able, and I would imagine was somewhat dangerous to keep a baby in the house, a male baby who was supposed to be thrown into the river. How much was it? But she was willing to do that, huh?
She was really very sneaky because she was really very dafka going against
You say the word sneaky. I find the word very brilliant.
Well, no, I don't mean not brilliant, but I just mean.
It's a way of saving a life.
Courageous.
She did.
Yeah, I mean, the fact
And Miriam was not?
No, but I think that TORAH was maybe risking a whole bunch.
Oh, yes. But power is definitely a heroine here. The Gemara, Chazal talk about it. Tremendous. They say she converted and everything. She was a real, she risked her life for this.
Was Yitro Jewish?
Not that I know of, although I'll ask the rabbi, converted him.
So
You know, it's clear that he did, and Chazal say clearly that he has taken over the Jewish beliefs. Yeah.
But following on what we were talking a minute ago, when Moshe is older, then he gets taken back to the palace. So if he was
Yes.
to hide him, and Pharaoh
Yes.
was just surprised at Pharaoh that he didn't sort of question and say, my daughter's bringing in this boy, where does he come from?
Now let us be realistic. How many princesses, how many children does he have? Pharaoh.
Probably
How many? Of course, dozens. And who does he care about?
No.
His sons. But this is the ancient world. Let's understand that, right? So, that's why it's very nice to say, oh, he saw Pharaoh and Pharaoh. If he was in the palace, I don't know. He probably had, unquestionably, I should say, a royal upbringing because she was the princess. But did he? Hey, Papa! Did he? That didn't happen. I really don't think so. But he did have a royal upbringing, which is important. And therefore, it's when you say about why did she couldn't have an Egyptian do it. She might be told, that they might tell the Pharaoh that, and nobody would want to. No Egyptian would. And the Hebrew was willing to risk her life to do this. She said, "Great, do it," but it's still mine, right? And so. So the sister protected him, provided him really with a nurse, right, and a teacher in effect. And beyond the family relatives, as I started to say, the most remarkable of all was Bat Paro. Really, it's a remarkable story here. A princess who, though Egyptian, took pity on the Hebrew child, knowing it was a Hebrew child that should be drowned. I think a Hamasnik, right? A heroine who endangered her life by lifting him out of the Nile itself. Courageous figure who manages to keep Moshe in the palace of he who decreed the infant's death. She hid him also. And consider this. She really reveals herself as a personality who stood in stark contrast to her father. Her father wanted to kill all Hebrew sons, and she went out to risk her life to save a Hebrew son. I mean, that's a very courageous thing. And in the ancient world, as someone who was obviously of the elite, a princess of the royal family who would never dare go against the Pharaoh, she does so. There's something in her. There's something within the morality in her heart, her sensitivity, empathy, sympathy, whatever you want to call it. And as you pointed out, as strange, and I said it wasn't that strange, but still was pretty remarkable that she accepted the advice of this Hebrew young girl to take a Hebrew mother, a Hebrew woman, to nurse the child. And undoubtedly, whether she knew it or not, that Israelite was going to educate that child in her young years. So, why? Does this have real reasoning? And why does it happen? And why did the Torah, that so often doesn't give us the stories of the past and early years of a hero, why does it find it so important to include this part, these parts of Moshe's life? Or in other words, what do we learn from the actions of these remarkable women? we got to begin with the most obvious lesson, and that is there are righteous individuals even among wicked enemy population. As hard as it is for us to see it today. But there are. Much as we learn from another story. Anyone knows the story of a non-Israelite woman who actually helped the Israelites? There were a number of them.
When I was in India recently, we learned a story about, that I think most people knew about the nanny for the Chabad family and how she fled the Chabad
Good.
house.
That's a little more, that you're 100% correct. Or how about, huh?
Joshua's.
Yes, that's right. Yoshua, Rachav, when the spies of Joshua came to the city of Jericho, they were covered and hidden and saved by Rachav, who was a Canaanite. And what about Yael, Esher Hever HaKeni? Yael, in the story of Devorah, Barak, and the war against, again, Yavin of Melech Canaan, in that, in Shoftim, in Perak Dal Hey, we read that the non-Jewish, the Yael Hever HaKeni, actually also supposedly now would be in of the, interesting now, of the family of the descendants of Yitro. Interesting. And she also saved lives, or actually killed the enemy of Israel. So we have that. So that's something to always keep in mind. Not everybody is wicked just because the nation is. By the way, these midwives, Shifra and Puah, were they Jewish? Were they Israelites?
Doesn't say.
Supposedly, that's the tradition.
I think it says the Jewish midwife.
What Jewish mother would call her daughter Puah? That's what I want to know. Shifra we have, Puah. Yeah. No, it could be, and Chazal say there were. But does it make sense? Yes. Hamiyaldot, the midwives, Ha'ivriyot, who birthed the son. Does it make sense for Pharaoh to tell Hebrew midwives, kill your children? Does that make sense? Or does it make...
They were the ones who are attending the women, Jewish women who are pregnant.
Well, I actually think that only Jewish midwives did that. So
It doesn't say, correct?
But right says, and that's why the Gemara, the Chazal disagree. I'm saying logically it makes sense that these were, they were Hamiyaldot, Ha'ariyot, that are mi'aleid, that they caused the birth of the Ivriyot, of the women, Ivriyot, Hebrews. So they weren't Hebrews. They themselves were actually Egyptian. And that's why he could ask them, well, why didn't you kill them? The Prophet says. And they said, you don't know these Ivriyot. They're Chichayot Heina. They didn't say, our people. So look, I can't disagree because Chazal says one or the other. But I find the logic to be that these were not. These were Egyptian. They were midwives who were helping to give birth to the children of the Hebrews. And they risked their lives. That's why God gives them such great, Yeah, Chazal said they were Jewish. That's why they made Beit Levi and they got that reward. But logically speaking, it would say that they were actually Egyptian. So we have also Shifra and Puah that one could say were outstanding non-Jews, non-Jewish women who deserve great praise and who were helpful to the Jewish people.
So they weren't
Okay.
really Miriam and Yocheved, Shifra and Puah?
According to Chazal, it's Miriam and Puah, yeah.
You don't have to believe all the Medrashim because they don't agree.
Okay. Without a machlokas, you don't have Yad.
I mean, I can't imagine Yocheved being told to kill all the same people and then she would hit her kid. I don't know. At any rate, that's why, sometimes you have to realize that our struggle is a national one and not a personal one. It's hard for me to say that, but because from what I see. But certainly the Torah is seeming to tell us that story. The deeper lesson, though, and I think this is important, is that it really sheds light on Moshe Rabbeinu himself, and gives us an insight as to why God considered him the potential leader, future leader of Israel, a leader who would bring his children, God's children, back out of Egypt. As an infant, he was brought up in the home of two women who refused to surrender to evil. Yocheved, who defied Pharaoh's decree and taught him his heritage, and Miriam, who would not let her baby brother be taken away from her mother and from the family. Then, of course, while growing into adulthood, he was molded by Bat Paro, a princess who ignored the evil decree of her father, and who obviously educated the young man about what is right and what is wrong, about morality, about protecting the weak from the bullies. Because what's the first story we read, right? That Moshe does when he comes out. And she implanted also a very strong moral character into Moshe. And then as an adult, Moshe finds refuge in the home of the Midianite priest. Now, between you and me, when it says Kohen Midian, I don't want to make you feel... He wasn't a priest. Now, so Chazal go crazy. He was the head of the Avodah Zarah, and really he changed, and so on and so forth. The concept of a Kohen is not only one who tends to idolatry or to the worship of a god, Kohen actually means an officer. Let me give you an example, if you allow me to. If you happen to have a Tanakh on you, look in Shmuel Bet, Perek Chet. I think it's the last pasuk is about Kaf Chet, where it says there that after David HaMelech sets up his administration, it says it also Gam B'nai David Kohanim. Now B'nai David were Kohanim. Now they couldn't be Kohanim; they were from Shevet Yehuda. Kohanim means high officers. That's all. So Kohen Midian means he was a high officer in Midian, well known at the time.
Like he was a macher.
Huh? Macher. Much better. Yes, we should. See, unfortunately, again, Torah didn't have Yiddish. What is it? It's a macher, right? So this was Moshe's background. Look who brought him up. Really? Does it say that Amram sat there and sat Tosfos with him from Gemara Sota? You don't see anything that the father's teaching him anything. Aaron taught him how to be a Kohen. You don't see that anywhere. The only thing the Torah purposely tells of him was that he was brought up by women. Sensitive women, courageous women, moral women. That's unbelievable. And we're blinded to it because they're so busy filling in the coloring books with all the nice stories. This is what the Torah is saying. You realize that?
So where is he
No
growing
name.
up? In the palace. He's growing up in the palace.
So he grew up in the palace. And why is that important? Why?
Because his mother is the princess.
Right. So why is that important?
Because when he kills the Egyptian man,
That's not why it's important.
It gives
So
him
you learn
royal manners.
royal-
There you go. God wanted not a slave to become the leader of Israel. He'll learn about the royal, how a royal... So he therefore had him grow up in a palace surrounded by that type of behavior. And that's what I think gave him the courage. Not only the fact that he knew what was right and wrong, but he can smite down an Egyptian. How chutzpah you have. What do you think you're doing? He could say that. Because as one brought up in a palace, he had this regal type of bearing, that's a good word, and therefore he could do that, and therefore he was able to do that. And that was important about that. So that was very important. And these were the influencers of Moshe in his early years, those who molded his very character, made him the person that he was, and the person that Hashem therefore saw fit to become Goel Yisrael. I have just started maybe the first third of what I want to say to you. But it's a perfect time for me to stop and please God continue. The beauty of not having a book in front of me and say I have to stop at this line or I have to go ahead because I have to finish this, I can tell you, Baruch Hashem, I want to continue with this. Because we're going to go up there, there's an Ibn Ezra who's going to give us something else, a lot of other things we can say. But how remarkable, and I'll finish this with this simple thing, make you feel really happy. We are told that for the right, we said in the beginning, for the merit of the righteous women, Israel was redeemed from Egypt. And I think after this verse beginning, now you understand about, maybe this is what Chazal were talking about. The Redeemer was a product of the righteous women. Pretty remarkable, isn't it? Next time, we'll see what else we can learn.